In the soulful realm of blues, Stevie Ray Vaughan's guitar spoke volumes. A virtuoso who painted musical landscapes with every note, he seemed invincible on stage. Yet, on a tragic night, the music world would lose one of its greatest. Join us as we journey through the remarkable life of Stevie Ray Vaughan, a tale of music, adventure, and a fateful journey that would shatter the hearts of millions of fans. Stevie Ray Vaughan was born on October 3, 1954 in Dallas, Texas. He started his musical journey early on, originally wanting to play the drums. However, at the age of 8, inspired by his older brother Jimmy, Stevie picked up a toy 6-string guitar and taught himself to play. His first electric guitar, a hollow-body Gibson Messenger, was a gift from Jimmy. Rumor has it that Stevie played with the wrong end of the pick, using the heavier part, because of his intense attack on the guitar strings. Despite not reading sheet music, Stevie had a remarkable ear for music. By the time he'd reached high school, Stevie taught himself to play the blues and refined his stage skills during performances in clubs in Deep Ellum in Dallas. In his junior year, Stevie had already made a name for himself in numerous garage bands. However, the traditional academic path didn't hold his interest, leading him to leave formal education. He and Jimmy moved to Austin, the vibrant hub of Texas' 1970s music renaissance, to fully embrace the life of musicians. While Jimmy's career took off with his band, the Fabulous Thunderbirds, Stevie, despite being the better guitarist of the Vaughan brothers, insisted on playing the blues, a genre that had limited appeal during the heavy metal 70s and techno-pop 80s. To make ends meet, Stevie resorted to collecting and redeeming soda and beer bottles for income, and for accommodation, he was often reliant on the generosity of friends. His days were a blend of musical pursuits, as he seamlessly transitioned in and out of different bands that secured semi-regular gigs across the Austin area. In 1975, Stevie joined forces with 5 other musicians to form Triple Threat. After a few changes in the lineup, they transformed into Double Trouble, inspired by a song from Otis Rush. Stevie took on the role of lead vocalist, and the band quickly gathered a strong fan base in Texas, extending their reach beyond the state. By 1982, Mick Jagger took notice of their musical skills, inviting them to perform at an exclusive event in New York City. Simultaneously, Double Trouble made history by being the first unsigned band to secure a spot at the Montreux Blues and Jazz Festival in Switzerland. Unfortunately, the performance didn't go smoothly, resulting in a mix of whoos and boos, leaving Stevie disappointed. But despite the mixed reception, Stevie caught the eye of David Bowie that night, and Bowie invited him to play guitar on his highly successful Let's Dance album, featuring hits like Let's Dance and China Girl. This album outsold Bowie's previous record by over 3 times, enhancing Stevie's commercial appeal and leading to a record deal with Epic Records. Double Trouble's next album, Texas Flood, left a lasting impression, securing the number 38 spot on the charts and drawing attention from rock stations nationwide. Stevie's exceptional talent earned him recognition as the Best New Talent and Best Electric Blues Guitarist in Guitar Player magazine's 1983 Readers' Poll. In the years following, albums like Couldn't Stand the Weather in 1984, Live Alive in 1985, and Soul to Soul in 1986 solidified Stevie's position as one of the best blues guitarists of his generation. After achieving gold status, these albums received numerous Grammy nominations spanning both blues and rock categories. However, amid his musical triumphs, Stevie's personal life took a dark turn. Embracing the stereotypical lifestyle of a rock and roll star, he delved into a world of alcohol and drug abuse. This pattern had roots stretching back to his childhood. At just 6 years old, Stevie began taking sips from his father's drinks, eventually progressing to making his own concoctions. This early exposure led to a dependence on alcohol, as Stevie admitted, "That's when I first started stealing daddy's drinks, or when my parents were gone, I'd find the bottle and make myself one. I thought it was cool. Thought the kids down the street would think it was cool. That's where it began, and I had been depending on it ever since." In 1979, Stevie faced legal consequences when he was arrested for substance use by an off-duty police officer. His downward spiral continued, and in 1986, during his European tour, Stevie collapsed, leading him to seek rehabilitation in Georgia. After stepping back from the intense music scene that had defined his life for the past 5 years, Stevie emerged from the hospital committed to the Alcoholics Anonymous 12-step program. In the midst of personal challenges, including a divorce from his wife of 6.5 years, Stevie and Double Trouble began recording their fourth and final studio album, In Step. This album symbolized Stevie's hard-won victory over years of battling drugs and alcohol addiction, showcasing his newfound sobriety through tracks like Wall of Denial and Tightrope, which delved into the personal battles he had faced. Expressing gratitude for his second chance at life, Stevie shared, "I just want to thank God that I'm alive, and I want to thank all the people that love me back to life so that I could be here with you today." Despite these personal challenges, Stevie persevered in his musical pursuits. In the spring of 1990, he and his brother Jimmy prepared to record a new album set for release in the autumn. The album, titled Family Style, made its debut in October, but sadly, Stevie wouldn't live to witness its release.
The way I look at it is if the next show we do is the last one I ever get to do, it sure would be a shame if I didn't really try and give it all my best.
On August 26, 1990, Stevie, alongside Double Trouble and Eric Clapton, took the stage at the Alpine Valley Music Theatre, located at a ski resort in East Troy, Wisconsin. The sold-out crowd of 30,000 witnessed an unforgettable performance. Following the opening set, Stevie, with Double Trouble members Tommy Shannon on bass, Chris Layton on drums, and Reese Winans on keyboards, delivered a memorable performance. In the later part of the set, Stevie was joined by his big brother Jimmy, igniting the venue with a rocking version of Freddie King's Goin' Down. The last song Stevie played with Double Trouble that night was Jimi Hendrix's classic, Voodoo Child, Slight Return. By all accounts, it was Stevie's night, with his energy, presence, and skillful playing filling the Wisconsin night. Jimmy expressed in an interview with Guitar World, "Stevie just smoked. It was one of those gigs where you see someone play and you can't believe what you're hearing. Stevie was unreal. He was just on another plane and we all knew it." Buddy Guy expressed, "It was one of the most incredible sets I ever heard Stevie play. I had goosebumps." Following their electrifying performance, Stevie and Eric Clapton talked about future collaborations, considering the possibility of a tribute to Jimi Hendrix at London's Royal Albert Hall. But unfortunately, their conversation was abruptly cut short by Clapton's tour manager, Peter Jackson, pointing to worsening weather conditions that demanded a hasty departure. At that time, a chilling premonition haunted Stevie. Just a day before, 36 days prior to his 36th birthday, he shared a disturbing dream with his band and crew members. In the nightmare, he found himself at his own funeral, surrounded by thousands of mourners. Little did anyone know this dream held an eerie foreshadowing of the fate that awaited him. In the early hours of August 27, 1990, 4 Bell Jet Ranger helicopters awaited at a golf course near Elkhorn to transport Eric Clapton and his crew to Chicago. Shortly after midnight, Stevie boarded the 1977 Bell 206 Jet Ranger with tail number N16933, capable of carrying a pilot and 4 passengers. Initially, 3 seats were reserved for Stevie, his brother Jimmy, and Jimmy's wife Connie. However, 2 of those seats were occupied by members of Clapton's crew. Stevie, wanting to get back to Chicago to be with his girlfriend Jana, asked his brother and sister-in-law if he could take the last seat, saying, "I really need to get back." They agreed, and Stevie took that seat while Jimmy and Connie caught the next available flight in Lake Geneva. The helicopters, engines running and rotor blades turning, were lined up on the golf course near a parking lot. Departing as planned about 40 minutes after midnight, Stevie boarded the 3rd aircraft, piloted by Omniflight's Jeff Brown. Interestingly, of the 4 Omniflight pilots that night, Brown was the only one not certified to fly a helicopter in instrument conditions. This meant that he could only navigate the helicopter based on visual cues through its windows, dependent on favorable weather conditions. And that was not all. Brown had failed an instrument check ride not long before the flight, making him stand out among the pilots that evening. The Elkhorn golf course is situated in a small valley with hills that the helicopters needed to clear before turning towards their destination. The plan involved each aircraft taking off one after another at 2-minute intervals, ascending out of the valley and heading for Chicago. Despite some ground fog in the area, the night fell under Visual Meteorological Conditions, VMC. This meant the pilots wouldn't need to rely on their instruments to fly, and an instrument certification wasn't required. This meant Jeff Brown was legally qualified for the flight. While Stevie was settling into the helicopter, unbeknownst to him, it marked Jeff Brown's first flight out of the Elkhorn Valley in the dark. As they rose above the parking lot lights, Brown unexpectedly experienced temporary blindness to the outside of the cockpit. If he held an instrument rating like the other 3 Omniflight pilots, he could have swiftly transitioned to the cockpit instruments, relying on the artificial horizon and well-lit indicators to continue the climb. However, Brown didn't have an instrument rating, and he knew he just had to maintain his course for just a few seconds until the city lights emerged, guiding the way to Chicago. It was just a matter of time before he could clearly see again. But what he didn't notice is that while he was staring into the dark space above the parking lot lights, he applied subtle pressure on the cyclic, a kind of joystick between the pilot's legs that controls the aircraft's movements. This maneuver caused the helicopter to bank to the right, halting its ascent. Within moments, instead of clearing the hills, the helicopter collided with one, crashing into the side of a 300-foot ski slope, roughly 0.6 miles from takeoff. The passengers on board didn't even know anything was wrong until the split second before impact. All on board were killed instantly, and the bodies and debris were scattered over 200 feet, indicating a high-speed impact of around 100 miles per hour. The passengers in the other 3 helicopters weren't even aware of the crash until the helicopter failed to arrive at their destination. At 7 a.m., authorities arrived at the crash site, confirming that the helicopter had hit the hillside 50 feet below its top. Eric Clapton and Jimmy Vaughan were called to the morgue to identify the bodies. Stevie had suffered severe injuries that were impossible to survive, including aorta transection, multiple skull fractures, a ruptured spleen and liver, and fractures of the right thigh bone and ribs. The investigation ruled out drugs or alcohol involvement, and all the victims had been wearing seatbelts. No mechanical failures or malfunctions were found with the helicopter. Quickly after, legal actions were started on behalf of the passengers against various parties, including Omniflight Helicopters, Bell Helicopter, and Allison Gas Turbine. Eventually, all the lawsuits were settled, with Omniflight bearing the financial responsibility, although the specific amounts were not disclosed. On September 11, 1992, the NTSB attributed the helicopter crash to the pilot's decision to proceed with the flight under visual flight rules in adverse weather conditions. The report stated that the pilot's lack of planning for the flight conditions, unfamiliarity with the area, and low visibility at night caused him to become disoriented and fly directly into the side of the ski slope. The combination of foggy weather and the darkness of night made it impossible for the pilot to see and avoid the hill. The investigation concluded that the pilot failed to gain sufficient altitude to avoid the rising terrain. Before his untimely demise at the age of 35, Stevie had frequently expressed his desire to record music with his brother. And in the spring of 1990, Stevie and Jimmy had started studio recordings for their album Family Style before going on tour. This album, the only musical collaboration between the 2 brothers, was officially released on September 25th, 1990. The album experienced a meteoric rise in sales, becoming Stevie's best-selling non-double trouble album. After Stevie Vaughan's untimely death, a profound wave of tributes and sincere grief swept across his fan base. His fans have enjoyed special shows and albums dedicated to Stevie, even after his passing. These include recordings of early live performances with Double Trouble and a special collection of rare songs and live recordings. These newer releases are selling even more than the ones Stevie released when he was alive, showing that people still love his music. Stevie Ray Vaughan's impact on music goes beyond just his time. Many musicians look up to him, and he has left a lasting mark on the world of blues. His legacy lives on not just in his music, but also in the hearts of people who are still moved by his powerful songs.